Okay, hey guys, welcome back. Just getting everything set up here on my end, but we do have about 2 minutes left until we get the meeting underway. So just hope you guys are doing great and had a good weekend. And we'll get this thing started in just a few minutes. So what I think I decided is I'm just going to run the meeting on Zoom, but I'm also taping the meeting on YouTube because I think the playback is better for me to share the video later. So I'm going to just type in the comments and we'll just have our chat here on Zoom. But if anybody likes the interface or whatever of the YouTube, I'll just give you that option and you can go to that link right there because it's also broadcasting, live casting right now on YouTube. And what I think I decided is basically this: whenever I type a comment in to our Zoom chat, if there's a key definition or something that you might want to have for review, then I'll just copy paste it and put it into the other chat as well. So that way, when I upload it later for you guys, you'll get all the same kind of typed comments from our meeting there. So no worries. I have all the multimedia tools that I need to engage with you guys on both. So I'll just be here with my sort of split screen view and just ready to take anything as it comes. So we're almost ready to start here. Okay, great. Okay, all right, we're basically now at 11:10. So welcome back, everybody, and I hope you all had a really good weekend. To everybody here, appreciate your attendance as usual. So as I was saying to those that were here just a few minutes earlier, I'm going to hold the meeting on Zoom, but I'm also recording it on YouTube so that it'll have a better view for the playback that you'll have later. So I'm just going to keep all our comments and stuff inside of the Zoom chat. But when I give a key definition or something, I'm going to copy and paste it and put it in the other chat too. And I don't mind if people use either interface because I have both of the chat bars on my computer screen just shown. So if you comment on either side, I'll definitely see it and I'll be able to respond to you in real time. The only difference, the only small thing is I'm just going to copy and paste the comments that I give definitions and concepts for into both chats so that there's a clear record of everything that you want information for. All right, guys, so let's get back into it. Here's a quick question for those guys that are here. Did some of you guys notice my study guide that I sent out last week? Let me know if you can tell me that one. Can we confirm? Okay, good. So great. That study guide is part of what we will deal with today. I have a few leftover notes on chapter 4 to talk about first, and then once I clean up that part of the lesson, then we'll move on to starting to talk about the study guide. So what's coming up next is a week from today, next Tuesday, we will have the midterm exam, and we have 2 meetings this week to just cover all of the stuff in the review study guide. So I'll just go ahead and get us back to where we were. I'm going to start recording the Zoom meeting now just for, I don't know, the purpose of being thorough and complete in case that's needed for anything. So it's recording, and we've got, of course, the YouTube live going. Now, where were we at? I think we got as far as the War of the Worlds broadcast. Is that fair to say, everybody? Let me know so that I just have the right idea where to pick up. Okay, good. So thanks, Lisa, and everyone else. So let me just briefly just kind of blast through some of the initial notes and topics in chapter 4, just as a review to bring us back up to speed, and then we'll continue from there. And yeah, go ahead and feel free to leave behind your, thanks, Daisy, I got you, good morning. I was gonna say, go ahead and feel free to leave behind a comment now if you haven't done it yet in this Zoom chat or whatever, and that'll just be my ongoing little attendance record. Okay, So you all heard that, right? Just go ahead, leave a comment behind. Probably most all of you have already, but if you haven't had a chance, leave something there. Okay, cool. So this chapter, chapter 4, is all about knowledge and the limits of knowledge. So I'm just going to sort of review the information that we talked about at the last lecture meeting. That means for this initial stage of the meeting today, I'm not going to type all the comments because you can find them from the last lecture. But anyway, knowledge. We're interested in knowledge, what it is, how do we obtain it, and based on the definition or understanding of knowledge, what things do we know and what things do we not know? So who thinks they remember the definition of knowledge? They could put it into one of these chats here. The definition of knowledge is thought to be what? It's three main key terms in the definition. So somebody just tell me what you can remember. Got a lot of resources to refer to. The book, your memory, your notes, or some combination of them. So what's knowledge? Okay, so it's information that we believe, which is true, and for which we have justification. That's correct. Not to worry, Alondra, I got your name. So yes, that's what knowledge is. It's information that's true and that we believe and which we have justification for. So sometimes people just abbreviate that as justified true belief. So the belief part is that you think something's true. And the truth part is that the belief matches reality, so it is correct. So you believe it's true, and it is true. And furthermore, you have good reasonable evidence to back up or support the belief. So when all three of those conditions are met, then somebody has knowledge. If even one of them is not satisfied, then it's not knowledge. Take the case of somebody who fills in the wrong bubble on a multiple choice test. We know that's not going to be counted as knowing the answer. And the reason it's not knowing is because it's a false answer. So you have to get the answer correct, of course. You have to choose the right response, but you also have to have information in mind as to why it's the right response. Otherwise, it's not really knowledge, but more of a random lucky guess. So with that, we can go ahead and move to the next point. There are different views about where most human knowledge comes from. Some people hold the view that's called rationalism, and some people believe in what's known as empiricism. So first of all, empiricism says that most of our knowledge comes from, not to worry, I got a DM about an attendance, so you're good to go. Not to worry, thank you. I have a comment back there. So yeah, rationalism says that most human knowledge comes from pure reason, ideas, and abstract thought. So with rationalism, people talk about the knowledge that we have of, say, mathematics, geometry, trigonometry, things of that kind that don't require you to use your five senses. On the other hand, there's empiricism, which says most human knowledge comes from the five senses and observation. So the things that you can see, taste, touch, hear, and smell. Now, what are some good sources of evidence? Evidence is something that could prove or disprove a claim. And people generally think that there's four major sources of evidence that we often do rely on. Not to worry, thanks, Kylie. See you there. Thank you. So evidence, things that can prove or disprove a claim. What are some good fundamental sources of evidence? You have direct experience. That's just being there and witnessing or experiencing somehow the events personally, firsthand. Then you have testimony. That's right, Jacob. That's information you receive from the report of other people who either say it or write it. So it's secondhand information that someone relays to you. Like if I tell you that I have, I don't know, let's say, let me think about it. I don't know, my car's a BMW. You haven't seen it. You haven't driven in it or anything, but you're hearing it from me, and that's just me telling you. So now that you heard me say it, you can say that you know that information, but not because you saw me driving in it, but rather because you just heard me tell you. Okay, then there's also memory, right, Eileen? So memory is when you're able to recall previously perceived facts or previously attested to information. So like I can remember that last night I had pasta for dinner, and I know that, but it's not because I'm having it anymore, and it's not because someone notified me of it. It's just because it's a memory that's imprinted on my mind. And so think back in your own mind about whatever you did on your last birthday or something. In that case, the knowledge you have of the events is simply based on the memory that's still there. Okay, and then there's inference. Inference is when you draw conclusions from other related information. So like seeing lipstick on the person's collar and then drawing the conclusion that somebody kissed them, right? That's putting two and two together, coming to a conclusion from other information that seems to imply it. Okay, and we try our best to have good evidence because that's what we need to know things in order to have justification. Um, Evidence is stronger when it comes from multiple different sources that all corroborate and confirm each other. So anyway, that's good sources of evidence. After that, we talked about how false memory can happen. Even though memory is generally reliable and correct, it can sometimes be incorrect and lead us to think we remember things that didn't really happen. Sometimes false eyewitness testimony, mistaken eyewitness testimony can produce a false conviction. Sometimes lawyers or judges or police officers can ask leading questions that can stimulate the formation of false memories too. We talked about unreliable sources of evidence like hearsay and anecdote. Hearsay evidence is evidence that comes to you, but it passes through several others first. And so a lot of times that kind of information gets distorted before it reaches you, like in the telephone game. There's also anecdotal evidence, which is evidence that's based on one person's personal experience. And the problem with that type of evidence is that it's just usually skewed, biased, or at least not representative of the mainstream of cases. Like if one person didn't suffer harm from smoking for a long time, and then you say that that one example gives proof that there's no harm to smoking. Okay, then I guess we talked about how to evaluate the testimony of experts. And we said that there were four major ways that you can look at the credibility of a so-called expert. You might consider the person's educational attainment, like how much they have, where they got their studies done, and what their focus was, or what their major was, or whatever, what their degrees are in. So education. Then experience is another point. You'd think about how long the person's been working with the education they've attained. Then you have reputation, which refers to how they're perceived by others in their field. Are they respected in the field or not? And then you have accomplishments, which refers to whether the person has any honors, awards, publications, or titles that further reinforce the credibility of their testimony. Okay, I guess we talked about some research resources, places that you can go when you're trying to do research. For example, the library, academic journals, government documents, the internet, interviewing an expert, or maybe just using the dictionary or encyclopedia. We talked about the CRAP test. Not so, it's kind of awkwardly named, but CRAAP, the 5 letters are each supposed to stand for a different way to judge the quality of a piece of information. Does anybody remember what some of these letters stand for? Maybe just touch base with you. CRAAP. I think we talked about all 5. Okay, currency, that's one. Very good, Eileen. Which means how up to date the information is. Sometimes the more recent is a little bit better. So currency, yes, also good, John. What's another one? R for relevance, yes. So is the information relevant to the topic that you're studying? A for authority, meaning who gave the information out and what is their credibility or expertise on the topic. And then finally, purpose. Well, there's also accuracy. I think I said that, but maybe not. Accuracy is about how true, factual, and correct the information is. And purpose is about why was the information created? Was it done to promote something, sell a product, gain followers, or was it simply put out there to give credible public information? Okay. Now, I think the last thing we had a chance to talk about was the War of the Worlds broadcast. Isn't that true? Talked about War of the Worlds, everybody? Just let me know one time. Just checking. Okay, good. And that's pretty much it, right? So let's continue from there. The thing that we have left over, just the last couple pieces from this chapter, has to do with cognitive and perceptual errors in thinking. Okay, cognitive and perceptual errors in thinking. All right, so the thing about the human brain is that we can and we do sometimes make errors in the way that we draw conclusions, process information, and evaluate the facts. And so because we have the possibility of making these mistakes, these errors in the way we think, either in the way we think or the way we perceive, we have to be aware of what the problems or errors can be so that we can, to the best of our ability, try and prevent ourselves from committing them. So knowledge is right half the battle. If you don't know what the errors are, then how can you really monitor yourself to make sure you don't commit them? So let's try and get a clear sense of what some of them are according to our book. So the first one that is mentioned is called misperception of random data. And I'm just going to write the definition out. Here's what it is. It's when somebody thinks they can see order or a pattern in something, which is actually random. Okay. There you go. Misperception of random data. When someone thinks that they can see order or a pattern in something, but it's actually just random. So one kind of, I guess, simple, trivial example of this would be like when little kids sometimes look up at the sky and they see clouds, and the creative mind of a child will sometimes start to go off, and they'll be like, "Oh, that cloud sort of looks like an elephant," or "That cloud looks like, a submarine," as though the collection of moisture in the Earth's atmosphere is somehow like a canvas on which a painter is painting images. Clearly, in this case, there's no such thing as the detailed artist's rendering of something. Instead, it's a random assortment of things that the mind is drawing associations towards from your previous experience. It's kind of like the idea of a Rorschach test. I don't know, have any of you ever heard of that? It's a psychological tool that is used in clinical psychology sometimes. A person is shown like this random ink blot, and they just ask them, tell us what you see or associate with the blots of ink. And sometimes a person will reveal deeply held psychological facts about themselves through the things they think that they can see in this random menagerie of ink. Sometimes I've heard people that have certain kind of beliefs or convictions say that they think they can see the face of like an important religious figure in like a discolored piece of toast or a tortilla, or like a discoloration on the side of a tree branch or a stump. And obviously, in those cases, it's again just something random, which the person's mental associations are bringing more order and structure to it than it really has. And this is something that we all sometimes can do, because the human brain functions in such a way that it hates for there to be randomness and an absence of order or meaning. So sometimes the brain will kind of like create meaning or order to something that doesn't have it, because that's easier for the mind to process or understand. I've seen people, look at satellite imagery of hurricanes and stuff, and they think, "Oh, I can see like a demonic face in the cloud pattern," as if this is some kind of divine punishment that we're getting, the hurricane, for like bad behavior. But again, we would get the wrong conclusion or the wrong assumptions if we relied on this misperception of random data and don't see it for what it is, as something random. Sometimes stress and fear can also influence this tendency that we have. Like, I don't know about you guys, but probably I've had this experience myself. Suppose that you're watching like a really scary film or whatever, like a horror film, and it's late at night and you're walking to your car from like the movie theater or your friend's house. And so you're a little bit kind of spooked from the content of the film. And you maybe rush along a little faster because like every shadow that's cast on the walls or every little play of light in your visual field, you start to interpret it almost as though it's like some kind of sinister figure or whatever. Little children, again, would be a good example of this, because I don't know, I can remember from being a kid, and if you ever deal with kids, you can see it in the way they act. When you try to put them to bed, sometimes they get scared, because they feel like they're seeing ghosts or monsters when, I don't know, like a tree branch casts a shadow about their room, or if they think they can hear some kind of funny sounds. So we should try our best to come to a correct and accurate perception of the facts in the world around us. The mind and the brain sometimes leads us to these false conclusions because we're trying to see order in something, which is really just random. Okay, thanks for that. Now let me give you the next definition. Hold on, I got one little DM coming in. I got to answer that. Okay. to the next topic. The next cognitive and perceptual error that's talked about is memorable events error. Okay, so now with memorable events error, it's the situation where you attach more importance to something than it really deserves. You put more importance on it than it really does deserve. And the only reason you're doing it is because it's something that's uncommon or rare or unusual. So here I'll put the definition and we'll discuss a little more. Um, okay, so you can hopefully see that definition there. Um, Memorable events error. So a person places more importance on an event than it deserves just because the event was not common, was unusual. So the thing about our mind is that it more easily remembers things that stand out from the ordinary. So when something is weird, unusual, not common, we focus on it more because it kind of takes us by surprise. But when we are used to things that we see all the time that happen on a regular basis, we kind of start to become numb to it, or we just file it in a different part of our brain as something that's not worthy of paying much attention to. But this can produce mistaken judgments and perceptions. So let me give you an example that the book mentions. Um, Now, if you drive at all, or even if you don't, I'm sure you guys know that like there's a lot of automobile accidents. There's a lot of people getting into car crashes on the roads. So I commute from like Long Beach to Orange County for work, and it's very hard to get through a single day without seeing at least somebody who's pulled over to the side needing a tow truck, or maybe even worse, like a total smash up and total loss of the car. So anyway, the point is that car accidents are quite common. In fact, it's one of the leading causes of death um, and injury in our country. So it's quite often that you'll see people with car accidents getting into those accidents. But what's very rare, or much more rare, is like a plane crash. So a car accident, you see it all the time. A plane crash, though, it's very rare. In fact, we've had very good success in the past few years with airline safety in terms of not having any actual airlines with crashed planes and that sort of thing. So even though it can happen, it's not so common. But when a plane crash does occur, it's a huge news story. It consumes our media attention because it's so unusual and so rare. Now, because the plane crash is rare, we place more importance or more significance on it in our mind than it really deserves, being maybe more afraid of the thing that's less likely to happen. So I don't know if you guys have heard this claim before, but there's statistical evidence to support it, that you're actually at greater risk when you drive than when you fly. There's many more people that die every year by a huge number through automobile accidents than through plane crashes. So mile per mile traveled, you're safer flying than driving. Therefore, you're actually likelier to die on the car drive over to the airport than on the air travel that you get when you actually make it there. But okay, question. Between those two things, car crashes or airplane crashes, which one do you think that people have a greater sense of fear about? Flying or driving? Which one do people have a little more anxiety about? Definitely flying, okay. But this would appear to be a case of memorable events error, because what we see here is that the person is attaching more concern to the thing that's less likely to harm them. So if you were just looking at the odds and the raw statistical probability, like the numerator, number of people die on air travel, the denominator, number of people that take that type of mode of transportation, you just have much better odds of survival on a flight of an equivalent distance than in the case of driving. So why is it that we attach the more great fear to the less likely harm? It's because of memorable events error, because we see these car crashes so much they become normal to us. So we just kind of become numb to it and we don't think it's anything to think or worry about. And then when we fly, because the crashes that could happen there are very unusual and rare, we focus on them more and we place more concern towards it. So anyway, try your best to proportion your concern for things to the realistic likelihood that it could happen. Here's another case I can think about with memorable events era, okay? So sadly, in our country, there's a whole bunch of people that die from guns each year, gun violence. Some person goes nuts and shoots up a bunch of people in a public place. There've been a lot of school shootings and other public locations. So that's an obvious fact. Um, Gun deaths cause a lot of deaths each year, a huge number. But then consider this: foreign terrorist attacks against United States citizens. They're very unlikely to happen. The statistical likelihood that you're going to die from a foreign terrorist attack is so, so low. And it's much more likely that you're going to die at the hands of, I don't know, like a psychopathic American citizen armed with really high powered weapons. But these domestic shooters, they happen so often now. There's so many public shootings, mass shootings going on, that we almost become kind of numb to it and we stop focusing on it. But a terrorist attack that harms Americans is much less likely to happen, and therefore, when it does, we put it on a pedestal and think it's much more important. So, what are we changing all our laws in order to address the threat of foreign terrorism? But we're doing nothing to try and mitigate the destructive impact of our guns and our gun culture. So once again, you could say that this is a case where the less likely thing to harm you is what we pay more attention to because it's more rare. And the thing that's likelier to harm you is being ignored because we've all become used to it. I mean, I remember way back when I was like in high school still, 1999, the Columbine shooting happened. It's now well-known cultural event. And back then there was not a lot of school shootings, so it was a huge media sort of report. We spent a lot of time talking about it. But now these school shootings, unfortunately, they happen so often that there can be multiple ones in a single day or week, and it's hard to keep track, and we just don't report on it as much or focus on it as much. So just another way of thinking about the memorable events era. Okay, so again, one places more importance on an event than it really deserves. Why? Just because it's not common, or it's less common, unusual. Okay, so next up, though, we have another of these cognitive errors, probability errors. Okay, now probability error is pretty straightforward. This is when you give the wrong estimation of the odds of an event. So when you miscalculate the probability of an event by a large margin. Probability error. Okay, just getting the definition here in our chat. Yeah, so probability error. That's when you miscalculate the probability of an event by a significant margin. And there's two different ways that you could commit this error. It could be an error of overestimation, or it could be an error of underestimation. So you could overestimate, think the odds of something are likelier to happen than they are, or you could underestimate it by thinking that the odds that something will occur are less likely than they actually are. Okay, so one easy example of the probability error is the gambler's fallacy, or sometimes it's just called gambler's error. All right, so famously, when people gamble, they sometimes get a little bit less rational, especially if they think that they're, possibly going to win a lot of money, or they're worried about losing it. So sometimes we get away from our higher standards of good critical thinking and reason when we're caught up in the emotional flux of gambling. So how about this? Let me give you an example. Suppose that I'm betting you on a coin flip, and I give you the choice heads or tails. What would be the probability that it's going to land heads? Can you just give me that? It's pretty simple. It's definitely 50%, exactly. It's a 50-50 coin. It's got two faces. It's going to land on one of the two, and so you have a half chance of, being correct if you pick heads. Suppose you pick heads and it did land heads, so you kind of like won that first trial of the coin flip. What are the odds on the second trial that it's going to be heads? So the second time you flip it, it's still 50, right? Okay, good. The problem is, though, sometimes when people are gambling, they start to think differently. So like they win a bet, and then they start to think, well, that's hot. I need to double down because like that's the winning hand right now. So like take roulette as a more concrete example. With the roulette table, you have like pretty much 50% of the slots are red and 50% of them are black. And then there's like two slots that are green, which makes it so that the house always wins, and there's slightly better odds depending on whether you picked black or red for the house. But anyway, suppose that a person just, I don't know, they chose the red color for the roulette spin, and they won. So red won. And then they doubled down and picked red again, and it won a second time. Should this person be thinking, well, red is on a streak, red is on a roll, I need to triple down and bet red again because the odds are getting higher? No, the probability that it will be red is the same on every spin. It's the probability determined by taking the numerator as the number of red slots and the denominator as the total number of overall slots. So that's the odd that red will land. It's not changing, not getting higher or lower. Just as with a coin flip, if I flip this coin 10 times and heads came up all 10, it's still a 50% chance that it will be heads on the 11th trial. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, what about the law of averages, though? If it was 10 in a row, it's bound to be tails eventually. Yes, that's true, but you would be conflating the odds of a extended series of trials with the odds of an individual trial within that series if you thought that 10 in a row heads means it's bound to be tails on the 11th. Yeah, if you flip this thing infinite times, 100 or 1,000, over the long stretch of time, it should approximate towards the 50-50 average. But that does not mean that on an individual flip, that larger series of trials can influence the outcome. Okay, so probability error can be seen in the gambler's fallacy. Sometimes it's shown also when we assign a superstitious or supernatural explanation to an event because we mistakenly thought that it was just so unlikely to happen. The book talks about that with the example of the lucky phone call, or I guess maybe you can use lucky text. So like maybe this has happened to one of you guys before. If not, I'm sure you can imagine. Suppose that like a person was thinking of a friend who they hadn't talked to for quite a while, So the thought of them just popped up in their mind, like, hey, I wonder what they've been up to. And then right at that moment, or right around that moment, randomly, by coincidence, what happens? You think I'm going to tell you. Do you think of somebody you haven't talked to in a while, and it just so happens that they randomly did what at that time? Can you guess? They contact you. So say you got a text or a message from them. Now, if that happens, you might start thinking, whoa, like supernatural stuff is going on. Do we have like ESP? Are we psychically connected across space and time? Like when I think of them, they text me. How could that happen? Well, it's not necessarily due to any supernatural kind of mystical explanation. The reason that the person thinks that it's due to that kind of explanation is because they are mistakenly assigning it such a low probability. Like, what are the chances that I would think of them and then they would call me? The reason they think that this is less likely to happen than it actually is because they have forgotten all the times that they happened to think of such a friend and they didn't receive a contact. And because those moments are not so memorable, they get forgotten. And so they're not really, I guess, appreciating the true probabilities here. They think that it's like a 1 over a million chance. But in fact, they've had these thoughts more than once in cases where they never received such a call. So the actual odds are not being correctly determined by the individual. Another case of the probability error, that's kind of a funny thing you can do as a class example. So maybe I'll try to do this. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But when it does work, it's kind of interesting and fun. So question here for you guys. Does anybody have a January birthday? If so, let me know in the chat. January people? Nobody? I'll just wait a moment, but if nobody says, if you do have it, you got to say. But if you don't, then I guess you just don't. Okay, well, let's move to February. Anybody with a February birthday? Alex, you got one? Okay. Anybody else, or is it just you? Omar, Alex, okay. Just two of us? Okay, let me see the dates. Can I know the date? The day? The 11th for you, Alex? What about Omar? The 8th. Close, but not quite. All right, let's keep going. Anybody with a March birthday? Let's see the March people. Okay, Lisa, that's nice. Anybody else? Look, if I get through all the months and we haven't had all of you guys responding, that won't be good. So anyway, though, March. Lisa, what's your date? Samantha, you're also? Okay, so March 1st. Alondra, March 21st. Okay. Samantha, the 5th. I'm the 17th of March, actually. If you don't know, that's St. Patrick's Day. So my birthday is always like a celebration for people. But anyway, I'm still working on this. We'll see if we get anyone with the same birthday. How about April? Anybody with April birthdays here? Let me know. April, nobody? Okay, so Jessica, just you? Well, if there's only one of us, then I guess it's not going to work. So you guys, so far 4 months, just a few of us with birthdays. How about May? May people? Any May birthdays in the house? Okay, Eileen, good. Who else has got May? Ooh, Chase 6, Eileen 5th. Very close. No other May people? All right, let's try June. Who's got a June birthday? Somebody? Okay, Kevin, nice. Thank you. Anyone else? Kevin is the only one? Or no? Okay. July. July 14th. Jacob, you're saying July 21st? July 10th, Lorna. Okay. 10th, 14th, 21st. Still not quite there, but that's fine. Let's keep working. Let's see August. Does anybody have an August birthday? None to report? Not even one? Okay, not a worry. How about September? Okay, Brian, September the 20th. Nice. Who else? It's just Brian alone on September? Okay, well, let's try October. October. Oh, happy birthday there, Zoom user. Eric, happy birthday tomorrow to you, the 13th, 21st, 30th, 18th. Keep just missing it. Okay, okay. Yeah, happy birthday, all you guys, October birthdays. Another 27th. Okay. November, let's just finish it out. November 27th and 29th. Ah, there we go. We got it. Kylie and Ashley. You guys are birthday twins. So this worked out. Now, I guess I could go through December too. Just let's ask why not, since we got through all 11 other months. Any December people? Just by chance? December 25th. Well, Merry Christmas. Nice birthday. Having a birthday on a holiday is kind of fun, except I guess Christmas is weird because you probably have people that give you one gift. I have the March 17th, St. Patty's Day, so it doesn't have that issue. But anyway, yeah, okay, so Kylie and Ashley, you guys have the same birthday. Kylie, I remember that you have interest in the horoscope, so maybe you guys are even more similar than just having the same birthday if you believe in that. But anyway, yeah, so look, the point I'm making is this. People generally think that it's going to be unlikely that you're going to meet a person with your same birthday, like in a class. And it's usually the reaction that someone has where they're like, oh, wow, I'm surprised. This I thought would never have been the case, or it's very unlikely. But actually, if you do the math, the combinatoric mathematics here show that when you do have a group of like 25 people to 40 people, the statistical likelihood that there's two people with the same birthday actually surpasses 50%. So it's a pretty good likely actual outcome. And if you thought that it was so unlikely that some weird explanation had to account for it, then this would be maybe another case of a probability error. So just kind of a fun little exercise. I'm glad that we finally got it there on the 11th month. I was getting a little concerned. Sometimes I do the exercise and it just doesn't play out that anyone has the same birthday. But you know what? That's rare. For the most part, every time I do this, we get at least a couple people with the same birthday. So anyway then, moving on to the next cognitive and perceptual error. I want to talk to you guys about the self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay, so self-fulfilling prophecy, this is interesting. This is when a person, they expect something to happen. And because they expect it to happen, that somehow ends up causing it to happen. So okay, so I'm just getting that definition in there. There you go. Okay, cool. So self-fulfilling prophecy, one's expectation of an event ends up causing the event to actually happen. So with that, let me give you some examples. Suppose that there's a person who, like on the first day of a class they're taking, when they sit down, they look at the syllabus or they hear the teacher, they just come away thinking, you know what, I have a feeling, I have a bad feeling, I have a real sort of sinking feeling that I'm not going to do well in this class. So what's their expectation? To not do well. But if they don't think they're going to do well from the very beginning, then what do you think that might cause them to do or not do as they go through the class. Like if you expect to fail, then what do you think that might lead to in terms of your class behavior? You might not try hard enough, right? So if you don't think you're going to do well, then why would you give the extra effort? Because you might be thinking it's just going to be a wasted effort. If I don't feel like I'm going to pass anyway, then why should I attend all the meetings, do all the readings, try my hardest on all the assignments? It'll probably be for nothing. And so because the person expects to fail and then they start acting like that, what ends up happening is they actually do fail, but it's kind of because they roped themselves up into this outcome that they don't want just because they had a negative expectation that wasn't based on evidence. Murphy's Law, Jacob? Well, Murphy's Law is interesting, but what Murphy's Law says is that if something bad can go wrong, then it will. So, like, when you're taking a, I don't know, road trip, you think maybe the car could break down, but you hope it doesn't. Murphy's Law says just expect that it will, because if something wrong can happen, it will. It's not exactly the same as Murphy's Law because it has more to do with the person's expectation being the cause of the bad outcome. But you sort of can see a little bit of a kind of Venn diagram overlap between the two concepts, I guess, Jacob, because in both cases, something that a person does not want to happen is bound to happen. But there's a little difference. I hope you can just see that with Murphy's Law, no one makes reference to someone expecting the bad thing to happen. In fact, if you apply Murphy's Law, then you would perhaps be more prepared for the bad thing to happen. I don't know. It's not necessarily that the expectation causes it with Murphy's Law, but I see a little bit of a conceptual link between them. Anyway, yeah, so here's another example. Someone thinks that maybe they're in a relationship that's not going to go so well, that they'll break up eventually. Or maybe they think the other person might break up with them. So if you think the other person doesn't like you as much as you like them, and that's your expectation, then what might you start doing after that expectation? Well, if you think they're not in it the same way you are, then that expectation might cause you to start withdrawing from them a little bit emotionally. And now that you're doing that, that's noticed by the other person. And so they start to withdraw from you, and expecting the breakup leads to behavior that causes the breakup. Or say you're going into a social event and you're like, you know what, I feel like this is not going to be fun. These people are all going to be lame and it's just going to be boring and I'm not going to enjoy myself. That's probably how it's going to go. So then you get there and you're all kind of standoffish and not engaged because you think that's how people are going to treat you. But then people see the way you're acting, and because of that behavior, they don't want to talk to you. So you expect people to be antisocial, therefore you behave in a way that leads to them feeling like they're going to do that. So these are in like individual circumstances. You could talk about athletic performance too, maybe. Person takes the field, they look at the opposing team and they say, I just don't think it's going to be our day and that we're going to come away with the L. But if they think they're going to lose, right, then are they going to make the extra effort and hustle as hard as they can? No, they'll probably save that for a match they think they have a more realistic chance of winning. But now because they're declining to take those extra efforts, they end up failing and losing. I can also apply this sort of thing to the bigger social world, which is also interesting. So this is a real one. What if everybody in society expects that the banks are going to collapse? Because they think the banking system might collapse, then they might all choose to do what? You think you can finish that thought, anybody? Suppose you believe that the banking system is about to just collapse. So everyone will pull out their money from their accounts, right? Because they think that the banks won't be able to ensure that they can reach their deposited funds. So everyone's going to pull their money out because they expect the banking system to collapse. But if everybody does pull out their money, that actually causes the banking system to collapse because now there's no longer liquidity in the banks. Because they don't have the deposited funds. And this is exactly what happened, like in the Great Depression. Everyone expects the failure of the economic system, so they withdraw their money from it, and therefore it does fail because of the expectation. Or talk about stampedes, when everyone's trying to rush out of a big, event, and there's a small doorway to get out. Everyone's panic and fear that a stampede could happen leads them to start trying to press towards the exits more aggressively, and it causes the stampede that they're expecting because they expect to have it, and they behave in the way the expectation leads them to. And maybe one last case. Say there's two nations that are on, bordering each other, and they each expect the other one to launch an attack on them. So they think that war might break out, and that's the expectation. But if you think that war might happen, then you might start, manning up defensively on the border and doing like military overflights, because you're in preparation for the outbreak of the war that you expect. But now those behaviors are going to look provocative and aggressive to the adversary, and it leads to the ratcheting up of hostilities until the actual war does break out. So in all these different examples I'm giving you, the person gets to a negative result just because they had an unjustified expectation that that negative result would happen. So don't, lead yourself to the results that you don't want simply because you expect those things to happen. Wait for the evidence and make a reasonable judgment, but don't prejudge the case. Okay. So just a little bit more then on this stuff from chapter 4. The last part of the chapter 4 notes talks about social errors and social biases that we can have. So one of them is called the one of us, one of them error. So the one of us, one of them social error is when we classify people into groups of us and them, and then we show less respect for the people that are placed in the other category of them. Okay, so okay, and yeah, let me just quickly put that in both chats. Okay, so you see there, that's the definition. One of us, one of them error. When we classify people into these categories of us and them, and then show less respect to quote unquote them. Now, one thing that's common among all humans is that we like to see ourselves as members of different groups. We seek out our identity as members of groups, and it's been said by some anthropologists that study human behavior that we are kind of like a herd animal. We like to be part of the pack. We like to be part of the herd. We don't want to be left out of the group. So there's a sort of natural psychological tendency we have, therefore, to assign ourselves membership to different groups. And that's fine and well, but it can turn into a bit of a problem only when we, therefore, show less respect and consideration to people who are not members of our own in-group. So let me ask some of us here, in what different ways can people be classified and sorted into various groups? Along what kind of lines? We can divide people into us and them along which types of lines? Let me ask you to say what you think. So if you're going to classify people into groups, one way of doing that, okay, good, Rory, is through religion. So you can say us Christians, them Muslims, us Jews, them Hindus, Buddhists, whatever, right? That's one way that people do divide up. Race would be another fair example, Alondra, yes. So white, black, I don't know, Asian, Hispanic. People can identify as members of groups, treating their own in-group with more respect than those who are in out-groups. Age, another good one, also that you mentioned, Alondra. Us, millennials, them, baby boomers, or us Gen Z, and them, I don't know, millennials, right? So we sometimes identify as members of a current age generation or whatever. Generation X, I guess, before the millennials would be another case. There's also gender, yes, men, women, and all the other possible intermediate gender categories that people talk about. Nationality, correct, Rory. Us, Americans, them, I don't know, Europeans, Canadians, Mexicans, whatever. Wealth, yes, another case. The wealthy versus the poor versus the middle class. And more. Political ideology could be another case. Liberal, conservative, moderate, or just party affiliation, Republican, Democrat, red states, blue states. So in any case, guys, we all do that, and we classify people into these different groups. But the thing is, we shouldn't use it as a basis for dehumanization of others or for disrespect of other people. I mean, many of us don't necessarily choose the given distinctions that we find ourselves in. And even if we did, we have to be able to respect that there's a diverse world out there where there's a lot of different people in a lot of different groups. It's never going to be a homogenous society, at least not in this modern world, with all the possibilities of international global travel and communication that we do have. So you're never going to just be in a one situation where there's everyone that looks like you, believes like you do, and so on. So we just have to accept the diversity in this world, and it's actually a source of strength. That's one of, I think, the great things about the United States. When you go to a lot of European countries, there's not as much diversity as there is in the United States. And so it's certainly one of the things I think that many of us here in this country value, but we got to remind ourselves not to slip into kind of disrespectful or dehumanizing treatment of others, even if we don't agree with them and if we don't find favor with some of their other distinctions. Okay, so that's the one of us, one of them, social error. And of course, when people feel divided, it can lead to all kinds of problems and social divisions, civil wars, sectarian conflict. Nations have been torn apart by those kind of things. And so we want to make sure that we all stay together and remember that we have a lot in common despite these differences. We're all human beings. We all have similar needs. And so anyway, that's just a point about one of us, one of them error. Now, just to kind of close it out, there's two more things to mention here. The next is diffusion of responsibility. Diffusion of responsibility. So what that is when you're in a group setting, like you're with others, a big group, in group settings, no individual feels a sense of personal responsibility to take some kind of action. And since that is the case, no action gets taken. Okay, so in group settings, okay. There we go. And maybe we'll put one more little note here. Example given, Kitty Genovese. I'll tell you about this woman and why we refer to her. We talk about diffusion of responsibility. Okay, so sometimes when you're in groups, you kind of don't feel any sense of individual responsibility. And if everyone in the group feels that same way, then nobody does anything and nothing gets done, even if it's important and there's an urgent need for action. The case of Kitty Genovese kind of helps to explain this concept. This concept is sometimes also referred to in like psychology courses as the bystander effect. I don't know, maybe you've heard it referred to in that way. If so, then that can help you keep this in your mind. So here's an example, Kitty Genovese. Anybody ever heard about this woman or the fact of what happened to her? Just a question, seeing if anyone knows. You know about it, Alex? Okay. Can you tell me anything about it, or can anybody say? I'll definitely let you know if you can't, but just thought I would see if any student can give us a few basic details. What happened to Kitty Genovese?
She was home and got attacked, and no one said anything. You know, saw happen.
That's right. Yeah. Well, okay, good. So you got it right. She was assaulted, and so let me give you the background. She lived in Manhattan, New York, in a high-rise apartment building in the 70s. And there's a lot of people that live in that apartment complex, so she has neighbors all around her. And the walls are not that thick, so you can just hear what people say from wherever, you know, if they're making a loud noise. So anyway, she's getting assaulted one night. Some intruder came in and was attacking her. And she's screaming to the high heavens, like, somebody come help me, come over here, I need help. And actually, a lot of people heard her. I think the number is like over 30 people said that they did hear her screams. But what did every person think that was hearing these screams? They were like, well, you know, there's a lot of people in this complex, and it's not really my job to call, so someone else will do it. You know, someone else will take care of it. And everybody had that same thought, and because of this, the assault just continued, and she was killed. So it's a lesson to us that sometimes when you are in groups, you have to kind of shake yourself out of groupthink and maintain your own individual ability to take actions. It's not only seen in this one extreme case of Kitty Genovese, but in more everyday cases too. As a professor, sometimes I see it because say that I'm like in front of a class and I tell everybody, okay, guys, who knows the answer to this question? Well, each student might be thinking what? Well, it's a big enough class and maybe I know it, but there's other students and someone else will answer the question. And so, you know, while I'm waiting for somebody to just take the initiative, everyone is like doing the same. They're waiting for some other student to provide the response. So I'm not saying that that's like some kind of big issue in my world or anything, but it's just another example of how sometimes in groups, we don't feel that individual responsibility of action. Now, diffusion, the word itself, is borrowed from like a concept in science where you have a concentrated liquid or something, and if it's placed in a body of water, it'll become more diffuse. So maybe some of you guys have put like cream in coffee, and you see how it starts off as a very concentrated drop of cream, and then it distributes out through there, becomes more diluted, right? So anyway, diffusion of responsibility is like you're that drop of ink that goes into a puddle of water when you're with other people. So your feeling of individual responsibility gets diluted into the group, and so no individual feels much like they have any kind of accountability or responsibility to act. In emergency situations, sometimes it pays off to be the kind of person that will take initiative, and sometimes you actually have to direct people's behavior. I know that people that are trained to deal with high stress kind of emergencies are sometimes willing to delegate authorities to people so that they don't just wait for someone else to act. So if someone's having a heart attack, it's not the best for everyone to stand around and be like, who's going to do something? But instead, just point to someone, be like, do you know how to do CPR? Okay, you go ahead and perform CPR. Do you have a cell phone? Okay, call the police. Can you run into the next building and see if other people can grab some help too? So that shakes people out of their complacency and kind of gets them to act, which is an important thing. And sometimes when there's urgency and there's a shortage of time. Yeah, so I don't know, the bystander effect, if you saw something bad happening and you had the ability to intervene and prevent it, then you should. But it's not only in emergency situations, it's any kind of group setting. Say you're working on a group project and everyone's waiting for someone to do something important that's necessary for the completion of the project, but nobody's going to take the initiative because they're waiting on the next man to do it or the next woman. Okay, so that's the Kitty Genovese case and the way that it illustrates the whole concept of diffusion of responsibility. Okay, and so then the last term to define for our notes on chapter 4 is what's called the Ash experiment. So let me give you some details about the Ash experiment. So the Ash experiment is something that it's not easy to provide just a quick little summary definition like in the chat. So I think the best thing for me to do is I'm just going to give you the name of it there, and then I'm going to talk with you about it. And I think you'll understand it pretty well. Maybe I can provide a little bit of a visual aid, and that I think will be useful. Okay. So this is an experiment that was done, I think back in the 50s or 60s by this researcher and psychologist named Solomon Asch. You have his name. Here's what that experiment was. So he wanted to test the power of conformity and how it affects people's individual judgment and behavior. So the study was designed like this. He would recruit 6 subjects to be participants in the experiment, but 5 of those 6 were all coached privately, secretly before, to cooperate with the researcher. And it was only the 6th individual who was really being studied. So they said this: we're going to give you guys a little vision test where we want you to match a standard line to the same length that you see in 3 comparison lines. So say that this is the standard line, okay? Now I'm going to give you 3 options over here to the right, and you're going to try and tell me which one matches the 3. So okay, now it's not perfect, all right, but close enough. If I showed you these 3, which one would you say matches the standard line? A, B, or C? Let me just see that. Okay, good. C. I hope it's obvious. I mean, maybe my art or my ability to draw is not amazing, but I tried, A is too long, B is too short, so C is the one that's like basically the same length as the standard line. Now, that's easy to do. That's easy to just look at it and make the comparison and judge which one's the same length. But what they did in the study was Ash told the 5 people, when we come to you, we want you to all give like really quickly, as though it's just totally obvious, the wrong answer. And we all want you to give the same wrong answer. So that would be like telling the other people that it's B, and to answer B as though it's just the most clear thing ever. So you go through the first 5 individuals and they're like, which one matches? And say B, B, definitely B. Oh yeah, it's B. And then they get to the 6th person, who's the naive subject. And what the real question was how will this 6th uncoached subject answer when they come to their response? Will they give the obvious answer that you can just see by looking at it with your eyes? Or will they give the same wrong answer that all the other people gave just because it matches the unanimous view of the rest of the group? And I mean, what do you think were the results? I guess, I don't know, it's probably somewhat clear, but the results were this. Most people did give the same wrong answer that the other 5 people gave, actually about 75%. So about 3 out of 4 times, the one individual at the end said, I guess it is B. Now, you might be thinking that they really knew that it wasn't the right answer and that they just wanted to fit in or not upset anybody. But no, in post-experimental interviews, many of the people said, wow, that was weird, because I started to question my own perception, and I started to feel like, how can everyone be wrong and I'm the only one that's correct? So I thought it started to almost distort my vision. It started to look kind of to me like, yeah, I guess I can see that. Maybe that is the one that matches the same link. But it's interesting because when they were not exposed to the wrong answers of the other members of the group, like 100% of people always got the right answer, like you guys just did when I simply asked you which line matches. So it's another powerful lesson to us, right, about the power of conformity to shape our judgments. We think and we act differently sometime in groups than we would if we were just by ourselves. It's only the presence of the group and the pressure put on the last individual to give the wrong answer from their wrong answers that led to the wrong answer. Apart from being in a group, no one would have thought that this line, which you can just evidently see, matches the standard line. Now, this is in a way a trivial test because it's just about matching the lengths of lines, but it has a bigger social impact, right? What if you have friends and your friends all have a view that they share and you're not so sure if you agree with them? Are you going to really be willing to stand up and say, I'm sorry, guys, but I don't believe any of you are correct? Or what if you are a juror and you're the holdout and all the other jurors are saying, this person's guilty. Can we go home and just vote for guilt? But you don't see the facts that way. Are you going to be able to say, you know what, all of you guys are wrong and the person's not guilty and that's the way I see it? Or would you be compelled to switch your vote to the remaining members of the group because how can 11 out of 12 people be wrong, right? So that's not to say the majority ever is always incorrect. Of course, in many cases, it's reasonable and we form a consensus, but you still have to rely on your own powers of judgment and your own independent ability to think. As a critical thinker, we should not outsource our ability to judge and think about things to the group. Take the group's view by way of advisement, but make your own individual judgments and determinations. So that's kind of the value and the point of the Solomon Asch experiment. So guys, I mean, we could start on parts of the review, but we have a full meeting dedicated to it on Thursday. And I think that we'll be able to get through all the notes on that day if we just use the study guide and go through it top to bottom. So I'm kind of just thinking we can probably close today's meeting a few minutes early so that we don't have kind of a weird disconnected, couple of minutes starting the review, and then we break into it again at the top next time. That way there'll just be one video for like the whole review session, and we'll cover all the topics on Thursday. So yeah, now Rory question, the midterm is 1 week from today. That is right. Yes, next Tuesday, it's going to be distributed through Canvas to you, just like the quiz was before. And all you got to do is fill in the answers and send them back before the time period expires on Tuesday, the 19th. Yes, so 7 days away. The only thing in between now and the midterm then is a review session using our study guide on Thursday. Yeah, thank you. So, all right, guys, I guess if we're all on the same page, just let me know here and I'll close our stream for now and we'll be back together on Thursday. I'll post the video of the meeting today to our Canvas page as we've been doing, and I'll share the link again for the Thursday Zoom class on that same page. I'm going to share the YouTube version of the meeting, though, just because it's going to have a better record of all the comments. Well, not all the comments you guys have made, but the definitions anyway. They're clearly shown in that, and that's easy for us to use as a study guide. Okay, then, so let me just say goodbye, but I don't want to leave you before you say goodbye. So feel free to just let me know that everything's fine. Okay, great. Thanks so much, everybody. I really appreciate it. If you need anything in the meantime, feel free to email me and I'll be in touch. But until then, take it easy and I'll see you on Thursday. Okay, bye-bye. And to the YouTubers, hey guys, I'm going to close this one too. I don't know. I think the best way to do it is to just have you guys, you got your options. You know, you're going to benefit from it by having the choice. So that's why I'm doing both. Anyway, thanks again, and I will see you guys at the next live stream. So until then, signing off. Have a good one.